Hey, welcome everybody to the Lone Wolf Show. I'm the Lone Wolf, and I got a special guest who has recently been nominated from the International Pagan Music Association, um, Alexander James Adams. How are you doing, man? You're over here on the West Coast, Cali?
Yeah, yeah. Technically, I'm supposed to be living in Washington State, but right now, where you're looking at here is Muskogee, Oklahoma. There's a Renaissance fair that I work at, so this is the time of year that I take off in my 30-foot touring van and go everywhere I'm supposed to go.
So, an IPMA member, when did you first hear about the IPMA, and when did you first find out that you were nominated for 2023?
I think it was probably Brian Hankey that got me involved in it, and just told me about it and said you should join. So I did. And as far as the nominations go, I'm just surprised when I get them.
No doubt. We've had Brian Hinkey on the show, and he's a great musician. He threads on that guitar. Have you performed with him before on stage?
Yes,
Really?
yeah. I was at gosh, where was it? It was Heartland. Heartland, 2000. I want to say 18. And he was there. I was there, and of course, you get musicians together. We're gonna jam. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So,
So, what instruments do you play? Do you play guitar like Brian, or?
yeah. Well, no, not like Brian. Brian is a master.
I think I worded
Um,
it wrong.
I'm actually more my instrumental. My main instrument is my fiddle. Whoops, are you there? There we are.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. My main instrument's my fiddle, and I've been playing that since I was like 7. And then I got a mandolin because my dad gave me this scrappy old mandolin he got from a garage sale, and he said you can play this because it's tuned just like your fiddle, but you play it like a guitar. And I'm like, okay, so I figured that out and played that for a while, and then I decided I wanted a guitar. So he got me one of those. So and then I added drums onto that, and then penny whistles, and basically I can poke around on a piano and I can poke around on a harp. I don't consider myself great at either one of them, but one-handed at least. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The guitar, the mando, and the fiddle are my main instruments, and then smacking on things to make noise.
Heck yeah, man! And there's just so much talent, through the IPMA community, man. And I've been seeing your name on the roster on the website for a number of years. How many years have you been affiliated with IPMA?
Ooh, probably about 5 or 6 now, I think. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and the cool thing is musicians can actually say that because I'm pretty sure this is the seventh or eighth year. I think it's the seventh year, eighth. Oh man, I'm going to get in trouble. Seventh or eighth years of IPMA, as
Yeah.
functioning as yeah. So it's really got some history and some really good musicians. You said you jammed with Brian Hankey, and
Mhm.
that in itself cool. I mean, I've got the pleasure of meeting Brian before, and he's a great soul, a great artist, and he definitely shreds that guitar. You're definitely right about
Um,
that.
yeah, he's got an incredible touch, and I I I actually am trying to figure wonderful things that I could write that I know he'd be good with.
Right.
That's because it's like that's the thing. Once you meet other musicians that you like, it's like then you start like thinking, oh well, so and so would be good on this, and so would be good on that. You taper stuff and you write stuff with them in mind, and then it's just 9 cases out of 10 when you ask them, they'll be along for the ride.
So you've jammed with Brian Hankey. What other pagan musicians have you been on stage with?
Uh, well, I think Nathaniel Johnston, I think is considered pagan.
Mhm.
He and his wife Tempest, I know she is. So there's those guys. Tricky Pixie is I'm part of Tricky Pixie, the band,
Cool.
which is S.J. Tucker, myself, and Betsy Tinney on the cello. So the three of us, we haven't done anything for a while, but that's that's because wonderful things like children have come into play, at least for SJ.
Mhm.
And so we're kind of waiting for the next time we can get together and make another album. That's what we're up for. And but we still play together when we can. And gosh, who else do I play with? basically anybody I could find.
That's spoken like a true musician for sure. Yeah, S.J. Tucker, we play some of her music videos on The Fringe, and they're really good. They're really good.
She's awesome. Yeah, she and I met a long time ago, actually, as a transgender female to male performer. I actually met her the year before I was going to transition, and I knew it. And I knew that the chances of it was in those days, we're talking 15 years ago, a little bit more than 15 years ago, things were very risky still, and they didn't know much about what would happen with the different hormones and such like that. So there was a chance that I could have lost my singing voice, which I'd had a career of 20 years as a female singer. And so I was walking around looking for what I was going to do if I lost my voice. And somebody said, "Oh, you got to go listen to S.J. Tucker. She's great. She plays really cool music just like you do, and you should go listen." And I went over to her show and I watched her, and I'm like, yeah, if I had to sit on the coattails of a singer as a fiddler, because I knew at least I could play fiddle if I couldn't sing. And I thought, well, I'll need somebody to kind of sit on the coattails of. And I thought, well, if I could coattail on anybody, S.J. Tucker would be the one to do. So when when she was done with her show, I walked up and I said, "Hey, if you ever want a fiddler, let me know." And then a year later, she calls up to my house. This was after I've already transitioned. And the story of it was being a Celtic musician. I basically made the story up that my previous incarnation, known as Heather Alexander, that Heather was actually a changeling from the land of Fae. And that, like all changelings, she got bored with mortals and went back to the land of Fae. Well, I was the stolen child that she had been replacing out here in the mortal realm. So when she comes back to Fairyland, they boot me out. So I'm now out into the world, and I've inherited all of her music, and I've inherited everything that she had. And but nobody had seen Heather at all, and I still wasn't quite ready to come out. It was only like 4 months after I had started the transition, and I wasn't sure that I could get out there in the public yet. And I get this call from SJ, and she's like, "Well, I've got this great gig at Fairy Worlds, but they want me to have a band." And I thought, if Heather could, come and join the band, that'd be great. And my partner at the time says, "Well, Heather's not here, but we do have a fiddler that could play with you if you want him." And then that's how I got into Tricky Pixie. And bless both Suge and Betsy. They were so good with me, because when you first start out, and if you are a singer, you don't always have the full control on your voice that you want or that you used to have. And there were many times we would practice a song in a certain key, and then we'd get up on the stage, and of course I'd get all excited, my voice would go way up here. And I couldn't sing in the key that we would practice it in. So I'd turn around and I'd look at Suge and Betsy. I'm like, "Can you guys take it up 3 steps?" Suge will put on a capo, and of course Betsy can't put a capo on her cello, so she just looks at me cross-eyed and swears a little bit under her breath and transposes it on stage in front of the entire audience. And they did it all the time seamlessly for like the first 2-3 years of our playing together. So they certainly protected me and took really good care of me. And that's the kind of people I like to play with, and I like to be part of. And that's one of the nice things about the pagan community, is I'm always finding people just like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
definitely an accepting community by far. So you said that you're at a Renaissance in Oklahoma now. And the first thing that pops into my mind is Oklahoma's real windy. It doesn't seem too windy there right now.
Oh, well, you can kind of see the trees moving around a little bit behind me. It's not bad. We've actually got a really good breeze for 85 degrees, which is what it is right now. Thank goodness, because if it doesn't move, if that wind doesn't happen, you get really hot really fast here. But yeah, it's actually we've had a great run. This Renaissance Fair runs from the last week of April to the first week of June, so that's 6 weeks, and we've had pretty much awesome weather the entire time, all weekends. It's been great, and it hasn't been too hot. This will be the first weekend that it's actually over 83 degrees in the day. So
what are you doing out there? Are you jamming out, or are you playing music?
I have a little stage that they put me on three different times a day on this stage show.
Wow.
And I just I do my because I'm a fairy tale minstrel. That's why I call myself fairy tale minstrel. It's kind of a tongue in cheek for those that are paying attention, because the initials of fairy tale minstrel are FTM, and I did that a long time ago, and just to see who was paying attention. and I sing songs about mythology and storytelling and fairy tales and things like that. So I'm right at the edge of the children's realm in the Renaissance Fair. And I sing all the fairy tales, Peter Pan and Puss in Boots and Grovel Hog and Pinocchio and all that. So that's what I do. And the kids have learned, and the fairies that are there, they come out and they play and they watch my shows. And so I do that, and then they have me run up to the castle and perform for Her Majesty the Queen at tea time in the middle of the afternoon. And they keep me pretty busy all day, but it's a great gig, and the people here they're just wonderful. They're just really cool. You might cock an eye at Muskogee, Oklahoma. You'd be, what? Would you really? Yeah. But here, this is a really magical place, and this Ren Fair is actually the only Ren Fair I will actually always work. I never refuse, because they treat me so well here. So
3 times a day. 3 times a day on stage. I'd say they keep you pretty busy.
Oh yeah. We open the gates at 10 o'clock and we close the gates at 6, and I'm pretty much playing the whole time. maybe like an hour off for lunch somewhere in there.
So they must be calling you a bard out there.
They do, which is odd, because an actual bard, I used to think that I wasn't qualified, because in the actual historical concept of the Celtic bard, you had to be not just an entertainer was like a sideline for what you actually did. What you actually did was you were the historian. You gathered all the news and you took the news from town to town. You also stood in as clergy in case somebody had gotten attached to too much responsibility, i.e. Beltane had happened, and here we are, and there's no preacher to get married. But a bard could do the hand fasting, which would hold until a preacher could actually come in and do the real thing. Wow. So you did that, and then you also would help settle disputes if there was no judge or law official that could fix a problem. So you kind of got to be this, historian and preacher and judge and jury. And that's a big responsibility. And I thought, well, okay, I've got the history part. Mm-hmm. And I actually am a member of the Universal Life Church. So I'm a minister as well. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not a lawyer. Well, lately I've had to learn a whole bunch of stuff about legal stuff, because I've gotten involved in some of my own personal, misadventures. And I've had to learn a lot about law. And so now I've kind of decided, maybe I can qualify for that lawyer part now. So we'll see.
So a 6-week endeavor at the Renaissance place in Oklahoma. I mean, that's a long time. Do you got other gigs lined up or festivals that you're going to be going to this year?
I do. Actually, I think Ginger Ackley is part of this group, and she's another pagan musician. She got me a gig at the Viking Festival in Ohio coming up. Cool. In late June. And then there's up in Akron, which is very near where my lady has her son and daughter-in-law and little grandchild, and another one on the way. We're going to go up and see them and after this. And up in Akron, there's a place called Dragon's Mantle, which is a great pagan store. And if anybody is up there nearby that, I would suggest you check them out, because they are awesome. They're established in what used to be an old funeral home. So the place is really pretty to start with, and it's got a neat feel to it. It's all full of magic and wonderful pagan stuff to get. We're going to do a concert there. Then I'm going to pop over to Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, not Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is the biggest fur con in the nation, called Anthrocon. I'm going to be there,
Cool.
performing that. And then I think what I do is I haul off, hit a couple home concerts, house concerts in the Chicago and Wisconsin area, and then head home.
And home's West Coast and Cali.
Yep. No, home is northwest now. I was born in California, but I actually, my heart resides up in the Northwest. And right now I'm a little bit outside of Seattle, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
So it's beautiful up there. It's cold. It rains a lot. I've got moss between my toes. Everything's good.
I mean, I could be dead wrong, but it almost feels like 10, 15 years ago, the Northwest, especially in the Seattle area, was like a lot of bluegrass, jazz kind of stuff. And it almost seems like it's like poppin' pagan music right now. Is that true?
They're definitely opening up a lot more opportunity in the Northwest for the fun and for the fun and open alternatives of the world. So paganism, LGBTQ, there's a lot more opportunity in the Northwest, and they protect them, which is what's so nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you a songwriter too? You write your own songs?
Yep.
And
I've been writing since I was like 15, 16 years old. And I thought at first, because they were so fantasy oriented, I figured that nobody was going to listen to me except my stuffed animals. But then I found the science fiction fantasy groups, and they loved my stuff. And then as I was getting on in a Bay Area, California Bay Area band, rock, a kind of a Celtic rock band, I had this little hedge witch come up, and she dropped a great big snowflake obsidian rock between me and the microphone. And I looked at her, and I looked at the rock, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And she says, "Well, the reason your amplifier keeps blowing up on stage all the time?" I'm like, "Yeah." She said, "It's you." I said, "What do you mean it's me?" She says, "You're putting out some sort of an energy that is so strong." But she said, "The problem is it's running through the mic, down the cords, and into the amplifier, and it's too much, and the amplifier can't handle it. It's blowing it up." And I'm like, "Oh, come on." I had never met a pagan. I did not know anything about paganism. And I'm like, "Really? Come on." And she says, "No, just put the rock between you and the microphone, and all will be well." So I was like, "Yeah, whatever." And the next gig, it's like, I'm bringing a fiddle, a guitar, a mandolin, an amp, a drum, a whole bunch of microphones. I don't need a rock, right? So I forget the rock. So we do our show, and the amp blows up, and the band looks at me and goes, "Where's the rock?" I'm like, "Oh, no, don't tell me I don't have to bring the rock. Bring the rock." Fine. So I bring the rock. As long as I brought the rock, everything was great. And then all of a sudden, after about 2 or 3 months, I'd forget the stupid rock because I'm tired, and the amp would blow up again. And I swear, at that point in time, I'm like, okay, I need to look at this paganism stuff because there's something behind this rock. and that's how I actually got into paganism, was because of this big snowflake rock that kept having to follow me around. And to this day, I can't be around electronics easily. I've got snowflake obsidian that I keep with me when I'm playing with my laptops and things, just so that I don't set things off. My lady bought me one of those new smartwatches, that they watch your heartbeat and how many steps you take and blah blah.
Right.
It lasted about 5 weeks. And then all of a sudden it started telling me that I had taken 40,000 steps in one day, and that while everybody else said it was 12:15, it was actually only 10:45. and and the day was completely wrong, and I'm like, okay, I think I blew my watch.
So to this
So
day, you still keep you still keep Obsidian around you to this day.
I have to, because I will disrupt magnetic fields. Apparently, it's just something I do, I guess. So
Now I'm not well versed in stones and stuff like that, but isn't Obsidian like a green rock that's kind of like a meteorite or something like that?
obsidian is black, and
Okay,
it's black,
okay, that's right, black Obsidian. That's right.
and like is it? It's actually I believe it's a volcanic creature, because you find it in the areas of volcanic activity, old activity, like in Mammoth Lakes. There's
Mhm.
natural deposits there, Mammoth Lakes, California. I've actually got a whole bunch from there once I realized what it was. And I was like, hey, I'm going to take some of these rocks. So, yeah, you find it in a lot of volcanic areas on the planet.
So they found you. You went out and they found your own.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah, that's cool. That's kind of a cool story, and that makes sense because being black, the Obsidian. Now I got it pictured in my head correctly. The black is like an absorbent because black like absorbs things.
it
So
does. It absorbs it. It can also reflect. I actually had somebody give me a beautiful necklace of hematite, and
mhm,
they said, here, this will be great for protection.
mhm,
Yes, it is excellent for protection. However, if you give it to a performer, and I've had a couple other performers validate this, that it happens for them too. When I wear it, I become deaf, dumb, and blind, and I cannot read or empathize with my audience at all.
mhm.
I'll sit them out there and I'll be like, and you are? And you want what? Are you having a good time? I don't know. I can't tell. So, yeah, I can't wear hematite when I perform. But when I want to protect myself against, everybody else's wahoo out there, then yeah, hematite's great. But
Hmm. So tell me about your songwriting process. How does that start? Is it like on a flim, or is it like you light some candles, you get some Obsidian around you? Like I don't know. Tell me about it.
it's different for me each time. I can't figure out any one particular pattern.
Mhm.
Sometimes something just hits me, and I come up with an idea, and I can't deal with it until I write it down.
Mhm.
I have to it'll annoy me, and I'll just write until I get it done. Other times people say, will you write me something? And I'll say, okay. And then I just kind of think about it, but I have to wait. I can't just, force myself, because when I've tried to force myself to write, that's when I actually run into trouble. That's when it'll come out, and it'll be like so contrived and so just kind of two-dimensional. It sounds like a kid being forced to do homework that they really didn't want to do. So it's like, no, I can't do that. I can't force it, whatever it is. I have to let it happen naturally. But I do luck out. And I tell people, I say, well, I can write you something, but I don't know how long it's going to take. All I can do is keep it in the back of my mind. And if something happens, it'll trigger it, and I'll be able to write it. But whether the music comes first or the lyrics come first, or it all happens different. Sometimes it's just a chorus, and then other times it's a concept, or sometimes it's just a single phrase that I just write a whole song around because it was a really cool phrase. I actually had that where a friend of mine took me on two different occasions jumping out of an airplane, and it was so cool. The first time, of
You
course,
have an airplane?
yeah, it was perfectly good. It's okay. It's not a perfectly good airplane. These airplanes are designed for this. They take you up. I was attached to somebody else who had a parachute. I was
see.
tied to them. It's a tandem. They call
Professional.
it tandem jumping. And the thing is, there's no seats inside,
Webcam?
and there's no side door. So if the plane turns sideways, you all fall out anyway. You might as well have a parachute. And so he takes me up the first time, and we all jump out, and it's all really cool and exhilarating. And I got to the ground. He's like, "You look like you want to do that again." I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it again." So a couple months go by. He takes me up again. This time, I could actually pay attention to what was happening. And that's what actually helped me write the song. But we were talking, and he told me, he said, well, he said, we jumpers have a saying, that everyone says, they say the sky's the limit, but we all know it's the ground. And I thought that was such a great line. And I wrote the entire song of Pirate Bill and Squidly, which are the two guys that were jumping and took me out. I wrote a song about Pirate Bill and Squidly. And so that was the phrase that I used. And it's a fun song because it's all about basically taking life by the horns and just doing it, just taking that risk.
That sounds like the biggest rush ever to jump out of a plane.
Yeah, it is. And there's nothing like it. There is not a single amusement ride that will duplicate the sensation of literal free fall at 120 miles an hour.
Were you allowed to have a webcam?
Yeah, well, they do. They usually have a filmer that comes along. You can, for a little extra money. For a little extra money, you can pay for somebody to fly with you, and they have a little helmet with a little camera on it. And these guys, oh my God, they are great because they can steer themselves in the air. So as you're dropping down, they stay with you no matter where you go. They'll be right there with you, just turning their body a little bit this way or that way to keep in line so they can keep that camera on you. And it's phenomenal how they do it.
Right. Falling from a plane, I would say, I almost want to say can be like an emotional thing, like it's just like I don't know, it's like an intense thing, where you just, emotions might be all over the place. And, as a songwriter, emotions do play a big part into writing music and stuff. So I can definitely see how that, that happened. My next question is I asked this to a lot of the pagan musicians that I interview, and it is music a form of magic?
Yeah.
You're right. So the common consensus is, and music is a form of magic. And how does that work for you individually?
Oh, well, for me, it really is spell casting. You've got rhythm and you've got sound. And both of those things, if you pay attention, as a writer, that there's going to be certain sounds and certain keys and certain melody snippets that will create certain emotions. And if you want to make something, then you use those pieces to make that thing. And when you sing it or perform it, while you're doing that, you're keeping in mind that thing that you're making. And people hear all the cues, and then they're like, they actually make it for you. So it's not something that as the lead performer, you're basically just the leader of it. But it's not just you, it's you and your entire congregation, which happens to be your audience. Mm-hmm. And they're all together creating this thing, this moment where they feel and exist in this state of mind where these images happen in everybody's mind. It'll be a little different, each person to each person, but they're all picturing the same thing. And when you get that many people picturing the same thing all at the same time, you've got a heck of a power. That's a heck of a thing to do. And I love doing that. And I'm very careful with all my songs. Sometimes I write some dark, scary songs, but I always have a key somewhere in there that gets people out of it, because I understand that you don't want to create something like, you don't want to create something dark and powerful and then just let it go, unchecked, unleashed, to just wreak havoc wherever it wants to go. You have to give people a way to control it. And so I always try to put that in my songs, no matter how dark or scary they get.
So a form of like collective consciousness in like repetition. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Repetition is, the more they do it, the stronger the imagery will become. it's actually kind of fun that you asked me that, because I just spoke to somebody about it. I use the word warlock as a description of my form of practice. And there's a lot of noise about the, oh, warlock is a oath breaker, you don't want to use that name, it's bad, blah blah blah. All I can say is that I've done, and I keep constantly doing it over and over again to see if anything new's turned up, that the etymology of the word, it really doesn't have any solid basis for meaning an oath breaker. They're saying that if you go with the Scottish Weraloga, that's oath breaker in Gaelic, which it is. But that doesn't sound half as close in phonetics as Vardlacher, which is Nordic. And Vardlacher is a spell singer. And that made so much more sense to me. And I'm like, that may be why I always liked the word, even though, and I liked it from when I was a little kid. And you could say, yeah, I liked it because it was spooky and scary, and warlocks are, blah, ha, ha, and all that. But that's not, I just kept trying to toss the word away because everyone said, no, you shouldn't have it. And I kept coming back to it in spite. And I'm like, why do I keep coming back in spite of everything everybody tells me? And then I started doing the research, and I'm like, because there really isn't any proof that it means that's what it originally meant, and that's what it originally was designed for. So I kind of try to do a little bit of, redefining it wherever I go. And I redefine the word warlock, and it's like, we did it with the word witch, we can do it with warlock too. Words are, as you say, the more you repeat something with a certain understanding, the more power it has. So all we have to do, if we want to change the meaning of a word, all we have to do is decide it means something else and change it and make it so in our minds, and then it will be so in reality. That's how that works.
Right. This is really cool. So you're a lot more than just a musician. It sounds like you're almost like an occult philosopher. That's really cool.
I'm working on it.
I'm kind of going with this, man. What's your spirituality?
What's my spirituality? My goodness. Well, it is pagan. It's not any particular theology. It's I believe in the will and the word, and I don't necessarily think it matters what you call it. It matters your intent. Whatever your intent is and whatever your strength of focus is. If you need to have a deity that represents what your intent is, then that's what you do. Power is power. And I think that it really doesn't matter the trappings. We are really, I do believe that there is no part of me that is not of the gods, as Emily Carding taught me. She's a friend of mine, used to live in Wales, and I met her there. She's in the UK, and she's in outside of Colchester, I think, or something. It's on that west side of England now. But and she and Sarita Dest, another pagan writer from the UK. They're both friends of mine, but Emily taught me that. She taught me that there's an expression of there's no part of me that is not of the gods. And I agree with that, because I think we are the makers of that which apparently have made us. We make them. And I think that there is a divine in all of us. We just have to recognize it. And once we recognize it, then that we have to be responsible. And that's the big one. The big one is the responsibility. And the do as thou wilt as long as it harm none has some vagueness about it, because there's always somebody that's going to get hurt somewhere. I mean, you can't walk in the dirt without stepping on an ant. So somebody died and you didn't even know. You know, I mean, it's impossible to do any one kind of impact and not have the opposite effect as well.
Mhm.
So my thought was, it's more about do as thou wilt, but be completely responsible.
Mm.
And that's where I go with it. I tend to say, you know, if you need something, if you want something, go ahead and do it, but be responsible for whatever the outcome is of you manifesting your will. If somebody does get hurt, you should probably be responsible for that and either take care so that they don't get hurt beforehand, or if they do get hurt afterwards, you do what you can to make that better for them, make it right.
Mm-hmm. I'm going with that, man. That's some really good advice. And the pagans, just pagan in general. I feel like pagans in general are just a responsible bunch. You know, it's a path of responsibility. You know, it's not saying that, you know, a particular sun god is going to make everything all right. Like, we're taking responsibility for everything that we do and never using that scapegoat. So that's really, really cool. You said a lot of good points. I like what you're talking about, but I got to ask you this.
Okay.
Because you mentioned deity and the gods and things like that. Do you feel like the gods created us, or did we create the gods?
Well, if I believe that there is no part of me that is not of the gods, then I would say we created each other.
Hmm.
I think that the thing that makes us the spark that is our existence, that is our humanity and our awareness, that I think is divine. And it is divine in a form of both light and dark.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't say it's all good or it's all bad. It either creates or it destroys, but it can do either one. It is essentially the yin and yang.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing that makes us exist, that soul or whatever you want to call it, that is the divine. And it is when we have penned the stories of our gods and our goddesses, I think we are actually just penning those parts of ourselves. And they are things that are within all of us. So that makes it not just unique. I mean, it's not something that I can say, oh, I am this. What I can say is we are this. And that makes it a god, because it's bigger than you or I. It's bigger than all of us put together. It is all of us put together. So in that respect, that is a god to me. Yeah, it's kind of an odd question to ask, but I think depending on how you want to look at it. I mean, you can say we invented them or we created them, but then where did we come from?
Mm-hmm.
If we created ourselves and we created them, well, chances are we're gods. And then, you know, gods are us. And so, yeah.
So it's kind of like the whole above and below situation. Like,
I think so. I really do think so. And the thing is, it's so big and it's so vast. And we really, even to talk about it, we have to find some way to put it in a perspective that we can look at that's outside of ourselves so we can address it. Thus, storytelling, you know, in general. I mean, that's the whole point of storytelling. That's the whole reason why it was ever created. Just like the fairy tales. It's why I love my fairy tales like I do, because all they are is kind of how-to lessons for what we deal with on a daily basis. It's easier to see something, you know, and call it a big scary ogre, you know, than to necessarily